Well, I think we can go live now. It is time, and welcome to everybody to the weekly live stream from Dave, KE0OG. I am here in Ridgeway, Colorado, actually about 10 miles north. We have snow on the ground, although the skies have been kind of clear here lately, and it's 38 degrees now. I don't know what I've done to my truck. It won't start. It's dead, totally, completely dead. So it's a Chevy, let's see, it's 2 years old. It's 2018, and it's very weird. The battery is totally dead. I had parked it with the trailer, and we let it sit for a couple days, and it got rather cold during those 2 days, and I went out to start it, and I mean there was no power of any kind, no light, no anything. So I've got to find out tomorrow what is going on. I thought I was charging the battery. The battery charger said it was happy, but it's not. It's very strange. You can't look at the top of the battery like you normally look at the top of the battery. There is a post sticking up, which I assume is where I'm supposed to attach the charger, but nothing happened. So I'll call the dealership tomorrow. I may have to call AAA and have them come in and tow my truck down. So for those of you who are just joining, let's see, we've got Ishmael Samuel has joined us from Dominica, and he has broken his toroid. If it's one of those powdered iron toroids, you can actually try gluing it together. It might help a little bit. It won't have the same permeability throughout, but it will be something. Probably best to get another one. Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where it's 5 below zero. That is pretty good. Bill Malman, AB4P from Tennessee, says hello. And 19 in Nashville, Tennessee. We've been watching on the evening news stories about the pileups on the freeways and things like that are happening out there. It looks horrible. Very difficult to travel, to get around anywhere. However, nobody in particular says it's mid-50s in South Carolina with lovely weather. A very snowy Yakima, Washington. Yakima, I think that's on the coast, isn't it? Ryan, KJ7 KVD. Peter O says good evening from New Hampshire, 31, but the temperatures are all over the place. John Sambrook says 50 degrees Fahrenheit and flood warnings in Kirkland, Washington, which is in the Seattle area, I think. Lots of rain. Russell K4QPR says you have 6 inches plus of rain, I guess. Can I finally make... Nicholas Hopkins has been trying so hard to make a HF contact with me. And I apologize, I'm not very good at that. I will be here tomorrow during the day because my assistant's coming over and we're going to make more videos. It's something very interesting happened to video. I'll show you later what happened all. Bob Darlington says, hello, Carl Weitzman, Roman Melnick, read AB8AS22 here in Barbersville, West Virginia, with 6 inches of snow. Trailer lights, I turned everything off in the trailer, but what I'm afraid of is that I think in the trailer there are phantom loads. And when you plug the trailer into the truck, I think the 12-volt systems are connected, and I think the phantom loads in the trailer pulled everything out of the battery, and I don't know why. It was kind of interesting. I went in and I heard the fan from the battery controller, which is interesting. the way it happened. What I've got shore power for the thing. I've got shore power, which comes from, I had an electrician put an outlet on the side of the garage that had the 3-prong plug for the 30 amp. And I've got 100 foot of extension cord going out there, but it's 10 gauge, so it's pretty hefty. And then that plugs into the trailer, and the trailer keeps its own batteries happy and everything like that. Well, I seem to have completely drained the battery in the Chevy. It's a Chevy Silverado, and they've got some weird stuff on the battery. Over the negative plug, it just connects down to the chassis, but the positive plug has some sort of a device on top of it with lots of cables running out. And then it has sticking up from it one terminal. I thought, well, okay, that must be where I attach the positive from the charger and then the negative to the negative. But no go. No go. I think a computer needs to be reset or something. I'm going to have AAA tow it to the dealership, I guess. Let's see, 83 degrees Fahrenheit in Sydney, Australia, VK2YIO. And hello there. Let's see, Ed K6SDW is there. Tim Backus is with us too. It's great to see you live. Be safe, happy, and have peace. Thank you. Especially on today, a holiday. Some have suggested that they name today Democracy Day, and I think, lots of other concepts, Veterans Day, Remembrance Day, Memorial Day, lots of things, and January 6th might not be bad for that. Although a lot of people would like to celebrate it on a Monday, of course. 75 today in Palm Springs, California. My goodness. Dave Rothgeb says KF6FE, Greer, South Carolina, says hello. Let's see, Bob Darlington says he nearly burned up his Ballon box going out to Dublin. Got to throttle that ready at full power. Yeah, that'll heat up in a hurry. Bob Darlington sends our first contribution to the chat revenue this evening, $5. And he's got some trumpet tooting cartoon characters there. So let's see. 29 in Denton, snow for Russell. You need goggles. Oh boy, if it's that bad, yeah. If I want to put a 6-meter dipole in my attic, any recommendations? Go ahead and do it. 6-meter dipoles are not very long, 3 meters, 15 feet-ish. Use the 468 over F formula, and that will tell you the number of feet that you'll be needing to use. And just make a dipole. I would suggest tuning it for the bottom end of the band, because that's where you'll find FT8 and single sideband and stuff like that. Now, if you're going to put a 6-meter in there to do FM, if you are one of the few people who lives in an area with a 6-meter FM repeater, then what you want to do is mount that antenna vertically. Otherwise, mount it horizontally. It will be somewhat directional. And of course, at that higher frequency, you'll get more interference from the house wiring and stuff like that. But go ahead and give it a try. I mean, you're going to get FT8 at a minimum on 50313. I think there are other frequencies where FT8 is used on 6 meters also. The only 6-meter work I have ever done was FT8. And of course, the ICOM will do that. Okay, Paul Russo says, thanks for the great informative videos. I am trying, I really am. I want to show you something that's kind of interesting. Let's see, we're going to go to screen. Okay, this right here, see this curve? This is a video, and it's this video here. Antennas change over time. Actually, a more thorough title might be the amateur radio community's view of antennas changes over time. But look what happened with the number of views here. We go up here, and then all of a sudden, 6 hours into it, it jumps way up here to 27,000, then tapers off. Clearly, somebody touted my video on their website. And I really appreciate that, of course. It says this video got 21,000 views from external websites or apps. So this is really amazing when I see videos like this. If they keep going up, let's see if I search across my channel for a short wave. Hello, Augies Worldwide. I'm Dave Casler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here with another episode of Ask Dave. Today's question comes from Ed. I don't know, I guess it started to play. My apologies for that. In any event, when people pick up the video like that, it's really cool. I've noticed that the videos that seem to go viral are ones that contain history tidbits, some little personal stories of some of the many electronics pioneers, and so on. So I'll see if I can't do a little bit more of that this year, see if I can work that into some of the videos. I know that a lot of people really enjoy it when they understand a little bit of the how do we get here kind of thing. You know, why are we doing things the way we were doing? And in that video that did it, I kind of traced a little bit of the history from my own experience, from my own 45 years and 47 now, I guess, years in the hobby, you know, ham radio, like everything else, has fads. And something's popular for a while, and then it fades, and something new is popular. And I mentioned that, you know, one of the questions was, when did radials suddenly become important in ham radio? And they certainly weren't when I was first into ham radio. Okay, so let's see. We've got greetings from London, Terence to Echo 0, Italy Papa Kilo, Montreal, Quebec. Very cold there. Kevin from Gilbert, Arizona. I'm going to be down in Arizona in a couple weeks at the Quartz Fest. The Quartz Fest is calendar. I keep a paper calendar. Quartz Fest is the 23rd through the 29th of January, which I understand is the same time as the big RV show down there. People take their RVs and go out in there in Quartz Fest. One of the things about Quartz Fest is that the desert out there is flat, very flat. It's not sloped or whatever, it's flat. And so people like to take their RVs out there and just, quote, boondock, meaning dry camping. There's no power source, no water, sewage, anything like that. So most RVs have some water storage built in. Ours does. And you're going to have to run a generator if you want to recharge your battery or your solar panels or something like that. And it doesn't get terribly cold there, but we did use the heater the last time we were down there. We've been twice so far. Didn't go last year because of COVID. And Quartz Fest is quite informal, but it's very interesting doing things down there. So I will be down at Quartz Fest at that period of time. My wife is coming with me. A lot of other ham radio YouTubers are going to be there. I know Kevin Laughlin is going to be there. I've confirmed that with him. K0OG is often there. I haven't heard directly from him whether he's going to be there or not. Okay, Don DeGidio says, Happy New Year, Dave, from an impending snowfall in Philly, WJ3U. The odd device, probably a Coulomb counter. Well, it's counting the electrons. A Coulomb is a unit of charge. And it's a unit of charge, meaning that it is a number of electrons, because each electron has charge. The number is remarkably similar to Avogadro's number, because it's 6.023 times 10 to the gazillionth electrons. The amp, 1 amp, is defined as moving 1 coulomb of electrons, or 1 unit of charge, past a given point in a second. That's an ampere. That's how the ampere was originally defined. It's the rate of flow of charge. Okay, so you can take Coulomb and convert that to the number of electrons involved. But 1 Coulomb's worth is quite a few electrons. Let's see. A Coulomb counter, technically, in this case, would be an ammeter. Okay, let's see. Hope all is well with you and yours. Yes, we're doing well. K4GTE, howdy from KI5GZW. Modern battery chargers will not work if the battery is below 10.5 volts. It's a safety precaution against battery explosions. You know, what I'm afraid I've done is this, and if I've done it, it's nobody's fault but my own. What I should have done the moment I got home was run the shore power out to the trailer. Okay? But we woke up the next morning to snow, and I didn't want to go outside. Nobody else wanted to go outside. So I think what I did was I ran the battery down to 0. Now, a battery that's fully, we're talking lead acid here. A lead acid battery that's fully charged can withstand like minus 20 to minus 40 degrees without freezing. But as you run down the charge in the battery, the electrolyte deposits out the sulfur dioxide or whatever it is on the plates and becomes, at 0 charge, pure water. Now, if it's pure water, it will freeze at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. And it was much colder than that over the last few days. I am wondering if I've ruined my battery. If I have ruined my battery, it's nobody's fault but my own. I have to be putting a new battery in there. However, this has got some weird stuff all around the positive terminal. So I'm going to have to turn this over to the dealership. By the way, I was up and looked at my airplane today. It's coming out of annual. Okay, now I would like to show you a couple things. One that's really important. Really, really, really important. Okay, this is a screenshot from, this is the Blue Eddy power station, which is 616, is a recent video. But I want to show you these little comments here. Note that they stole my picture, okay, and then created 2 different channels. One was WhatsApp, and then it's got spelled out a phone number right there. Okay, contact the number above for interaction on claiming your parcel. And then this one, the same thing, same modus, text plus another phone number, contact something special for you. These are spam. Furthermore, they're probably dangerous spam. If you were to call those numbers, bad things could happen. Now, note that the name of the channel is this right here. That's actually the name of a channel. So I went in, I talked to Google over their chat help feature, and I went in and I banned these two channels, and I went through and deleted all the ones that I could find. I don't see any more on my channel, and this channel has been banned from the network now. So if for some reason you see this, see how these things are in little numbers? That is actually the name of the channel. I think the channel has already disappeared from YouTube. And see how they were using my face photograph to do that. So that is a fairly sophisticated form of hacking. And what I'm afraid of is I just hope nobody got caught up in that and called that number. Brad Rich called me because he had made a comment, and there was that. This was a comment that was made in response to comment. That's how all these were. They were responses to comments. So he called me at a number he knew was good. And that's how I discovered that the thing was going bad. Okay, so please beware of that and don't fall for that. Now I want to show you something else here. This came from a guy who is a flight trainer at Boeing Field. And he said that this morning, this aircraft was there for maintenance. It's AA7MO, Mike Oswald, who is a CFI flight trainer. But notice the number on here, N742, it looks like OG. Now, I know that's a 0, 7420, but it could be misinterpreted as OG. And so he thought that was pretty good. Now, I'm 8053 Romeo on my airplane, and it turns out after you first announced your 8053 Romeo, that's November 8053 Romeo. Everybody drops the November. 8053 Romeo. Then after that, you just use the last three, 53 Romeo. When I was down at the airport hangar today to look at what they were doing to my airplane, it was quite interesting. They said they've got another 53 Romeo sitting feet away. Had a whole different front end number, but it was 53 Romeo. So very interesting. Okay, let's see. Plenty of activity on 6. W9NAF, Robert Tucker is there. By the way, we had the drawing last week for the antenna. Some guy in Alaska got it. And that has already been sent off. It was an expensive package to send off, but we sent it off. And it will. We're doing another thing here. I'm going to try to shorten in the videos the plea for subscribers, the plea for money, and to talk about the next. The next giveaway. This is the next giveaway. This is giveaway number 6. This is one of those little emergency radios that you can hand crank or leave it in the sun. It's got other little things. There's a little flashlight on it. And it's got radio, weather radio, and I think the BT position is here. You can put in let's see, a little more light. That doesn't help much, does it? Anyway, I think this is for charging your phone. And so it's just a cute little thing. It comes from, it just says radio, RADIO. It's a Chinese little thing from, of all people, Radiodity. And this thing is called, will that focus? I don't know. There we go, Raddy. It's the Raddy RW3. And this is the giveaway. It works. I mean, it's not all that fantastic to listen to, but let's see, power on.
Even though they have a lot of experience now with remote learning,
it doesn't mean that the transition from one.
Okay, so nice little thing to have, not very big. Okay, nice little thing to have, and that is giveaway number 6. So send your card or letter to Dave Casler, KE0OG, and at P.O. Box 98. P.O. Box 98, Ridgeway, Colorado 81432. Okay, put on it giveaway number 6. You should have on it your own mailing address, okay, where you want it mailed. This actually was just a Christmas card. Let's take one of these. This was one that was late for drawing number 5. But put your return address, the giveaway number, which is 6 in this case, and send it along. You can. A lot of people will put a QSL card inside an envelope. Some people just send the QSL card, and a few people actually send postcards. Postcards by far the cheapest way to enter. We do one of these every month. So what I would do is go down to the post office and buy 12 postcards. They're cheaper than regular stamps. And they are also forever. Okay? So they retain their value. They've always got postcard postage on them. And then you can send those in that way. And then you can send one every month or something. It's just really nice to hear from people. I do look at everything that comes in. I do open all the envelopes because sometimes people will attach a separate letter or something like that. One of the questions that made its way into the Ask Dave column in QST actually came as a hand-printed question on yellow-lined paper in one of the entries. And thank goodness it was separate, so I could take it out separate and leave that in the entry over there. If K7AGE is going to Quartz Fest this year, I do not know. Let's see. David K3DHJ checking in from Northern Delaware. David says smash that like button. James says live is live. It's actually delayed by about a minute, but that's okay. Jose Pisano says hello from Lima, Peru. Oscar Alpha 4, Bravo Alpha, Quebec. Says 73 and a Happy New Year. Thank you. And then here is Philip, 9 Alpha 3, Bravo Charlie Whiskey. Hello, Dave. Greetings from Croatia. Good evening from Hopkinton, Massachusetts. Arkansas. Thursday night's good. Philip asks if K7AGE is going to be a Quartz Fest. I don't know yet. He often goes. He doesn't put out so many videos on his channel, so he's got a little more time. on his hands here. I'm still doing a video a day. And so far it's working. I guess people like it. RVers camp on BLM land. Ham radio attracts 600 plus participants, sometimes way more. That is about Quartz Fest that he's talking about there. That's absolutely true. There are two kinds of BLM land down there. There's the long-term stay, where you pay like $180 or $200, and you can stay for, I think, up to 6 months there. And a lot of people have their favorite spot they go back to every year. And then there are other areas, including the area where Quartz Fest will be, that are free, but only for 14 days. Okay. So now my sister and her husband purchased a permanently parked RV at an RV park in Quartz Fest. So in Quartzsite. Quartz Fest is actually about 5 miles south. So, okay, let's see. Special Event Station will be operating there in Arizona as W7Q. Cool. At Quartz Fest, you and Kevin Laughlin do a video for YouTube. Cool if you could do it live. Well, we may be able to do that. Reed says that Randy is going to Quartz Fest as of last night. Great, great. Now, we're all wondering about COVID, of course. I've had my 2 shots and my booster. And I suppose I'll be wearing a mask down there. I am one of those at-risk people. I'm 70. I'm overweight by like a whole bunch. I'm diabetic. I, need oxygen, although I don't need it lower. I noticed we were in Moab over Christmas, and we got back home, and we live at 7,000 feet. And boy, I sure noticed the elevation difference. And of course, Quartzsite is about 1,000 feet above sea level. Okay, Harry Rundle says, good evening. Dave, won't the quartz cause problems for the radio? Russians closing up an underground base in the Ural Mountains due to the quartz in the mountain affected comms. Quartz has what's called a piezoelectric effect. Let me show you how that works. If you take a piece of quartz, and this is crystalline quartz. Okay, it doesn't work unless it's a crystal. And there are a few places in the world where you can find good quartz crystals. During World War II, the U.S. went down and procured themselves a monopoly on the quartz mines in Brazil. And there's a whole book about this, about crystals in World War II. But you put an electric plate on here, okay, attach that to wires. Now, it works both ways. If you vibrate the crystal mechanically, it will produce an output that corresponds to the vibration. So you can use these as sensors, or microphones if you want to, but not the world's best for microphones. It works the other way too. If you put electricity in here, the crystal will vibrate in concert with it. Now, what's particularly interesting about quartz crystals is that they have a very sharp peak. So if you're trying to vibrate it with an electrical signal here, it won't. Here it won't. But here, it'll vibrate like crazy. And the Q, which is the quality factor, is also the amplification factor. And so if you put this in as part of an oscillator, the oscillator, if set up properly, will vibrate at that one single frequency. Now there's obviously a little bit of dither and stuff like that, but if you use analog means for feedback, that becomes a very, very good oscillator, and that's how you keep it at the right rate. Anyway, quartz in and of itself, the quartz that you find in the wild, unless they are quartz crystals, are not going to interfere much. They're not conductors to speak of. They just have this piezoelectric effect. Other crystals and ceramics have this piezoelectric effect. It is piezoelectric effect. Okay, piezo. P-I-E-Z-O, piezoelectric effect. So yeah, let's see. Randy's going to Quartz Fest. Hello, Dave from New Mexico. Okay. Don't forget to smash like. Thank you. Ranger Smiths, hello from snowy Tennessee. Stay off the roads there. Why are 6 meter and 10 meter repeaters so rare? Because 2 meter and 70 centimeter repeaters are so much easier to do. Now the problem with them is you have to, in using, and you don't have to do this, you can use separate antennas for receive and transmit. But if you use the same antenna, when the transmitter output cannot get back into the receiver, so you need filtering to do that. On 2 meters, we use what are often called cans, because that's what they look like. They're fairly large and about a half wavelength high. No, that would be 3 meters. They're about a quarter wavelength high, 19 inches. And they are expensive. And if you try and do a repeater on 6 or 10, you've got a real problem with the filtering. Plus, antennas for mobile work on 10 meters and 6 meters are cumbersome. Whereas on 2 meters, it's very easy. Now, the first amateur repeaters were made from old Motorola equipment from police departments and people like that. They would get them and then retune them for the amateur bands, which is what our repeater is in Montrose, up on top of Flat Top, is a repurposed sheriff's repeater that now works on 2 meters. Nowadays, they've got new stuff out there, but that's kind of the reason that we gravitated to 2 meters, because there was one, a lot of equipment, okay, and 2, you could use a handheld with a little antenna, or you could make it a 19-inch antenna, or you could put an antenna on your roof, and so on. So it's just the size of the antenna, the size of the equipment, availability of equipment, and so on. So that's why it started mostly on 2 meters. Okay, let's see. Felipe Lewis sent $100 in chat revenue. Thank you very much, Felipe. Happy New Year. World War II was less than 100 years ago, and radio played a big role for people to listen overseas to hear the latest news. Do you feel if another world war occurred, would amateur radio be disallowed or jammed? Realistically, what do you think would happen? It depends on the scenario. The armed forces no longer use HF like they used to. They use a lot of satellite. They actually do a lot of stuff over the internet. And it would not require that the hams give up their HF frequencies, okay? because the equipment today is far more modern, far better integrated, and so on. There are quite a number of military comm systems along that ilk. So would ham radio be shut down? We were not shut down during the Gulf War or the Afghan War at all. There was no talk of it even during either Gulf War, which were very hot wars. And now the reason, World War II, everybody felt World War II. The numbers of people in the military were far higher, closer to 4 million. If you were of a certain age, you were expected to be in the military unless you were lame or blind or had a critical job at a defense facility. The men went to war. Same happened in Germany. The men went to war. And in the United States, that meant all the defense factories were gutted of people. And so the defense factories did the obvious. They hired women. Back then, very, very, very few women worked in the workforce. And so they hired women to work. And this is where Rosie the Riveter came from. Women are perfectly capable of running aircraft factories. The idea of Rosie the Riveter and so on is very real. We hired our women. Now, after proving that they were great in the workforce, when all the men came home, the idea was this. Now, you've got to think of this in 1940s terms, okay? A very different world from what we live in now. But the women were expected to quit, go home, be housewives, so that the men had jobs to come back to. The idea was that the man supported the family. It was an extremely strong precept at the time. And so they did. They supported the men supported the families, the women were homemakers. There wasn't that much pushback against that. You got more women in teaching positions than men used to be, or most teachers used to be men, but that changed over to women. Secretarial work changed over to women. Telephone operators, they tried teenage boys initially, and you can imagine how poorly that worked. So they got rid of all the teenage boys and hired women, and it's still true to this day. Dispatchers are often women because their voices are easier to hear over the radio. And that most dispatchers that I know of are women, but there are many who are not. So, now, in Germany, what did they do? They needed workers in their factories because they had taken all the men into the service. The Germans could have done the same thing. And the Hausfrau might have been better off if they had. Because you would have put more money into the economy and so on. But what they did instead was slave labor. They pulled in prisoners from Poland, from Russia, of course, the Jews. And they would work them. They had this all figured out. If they fed the worker this much, the worker would live for this many months before they died, and they had to replace them. It was that callous and cruel. It was terribly cruel. The Germans could just as easily have hired their women, but they wanted the women to stay at home even during the war. It shows a very different understanding of humanity between the two sides. Now, of course, that was 1940s, just 80 years ago. Everything has changed since then. Now, we're in the middle of the COVID problem, and a lot of workers are not able to go to work because of the COVID thing. I mean, it's decimating workplaces everywhere. This is one of the major reasons that airlines are having to cancel flights. They can't get crews for them. My daughter got caught up in that. She was flying somewhere and they were waiting for the pilot. And the pilot didn't show in time. And so they had to cancel the flight, deplane everywhere. So that's the kind of thing that can happen. Now, this is creating a problem because the reason that women in the U.S. have re-entered the workforce is because childcare has been available. And, you know, you pay some childcare provider $15 an hour and they can watch 20 kids, 15 kids, whatever it is. I don't know anything about childcare. Didn't use it much when my kids were small, but we did use it some. Now with COVID, when the schools close and do remote learning, that means mama needs to stay home with the kids. Well, there goes her job. And this is creating a real, genuine problem right now in our society because women who have counted on childcare are not finding it right now. I mean, this will all settle out with time, but it's just a disruption right now because, and of course the same thing had to happen back during World War II. There were kids at home and things like that. But anyway, I think that kind of answers your question. Would amateur radio be disallowed or jammed? I do not think so, because we were not troubled in any way by the two Gulf Wars and the Afghan War. Okay? The reason we didn't feel those wars the same way World War II and Korea did, and Vietnam, was because there's no draft today. It used to be if you were drafted into the Army, you'd serve one year in Vietnam, and that was that. Now they're taking the people who have volunteered for the military and having them serve over and over and over and over again in the theater of war. Fortunately, that's now settled down, but we'll see what happens. Okay, anyway, greetings from KN4RBJ, Carl in South Carolina. John Sambrook talks about ultrasound transducers, often run at a few megahertz and up to 20 to 30 megahertz or so. Yeah, you can do that. There isn't really jamming technology to just block everything everywhere. That is true. If you're being jammed, jamming was popular during the Cold War. You could hear stations being jammed. Different countries would jam each other's broadcasts. But the Russian base was called Mount Yamantu, basically the Russian version of Cheyenne Mountain. Okay. I'd like to learn more about that. Would a quartz crystal be used as a passive resonator like the Russian spy gadget called the Thing? I don't know enough about that to know what it would be. David Robinson says hello from Missouri, KE0OG. Quartz crystals are used to figure out how long a second is in a quartz watch or clock. Counts the vibrations and says, okay, that was a second. Yes. And quartz crystals are better than any mechanical movement. Just about any mechanical movement. And I expect different things of my clocks. I have a clock right up there that's a mechanical clock, Chinese, and it is truly all mechanical. A pendulum, springs to wind, and everything. And if that's within 5 minutes, I'm happy. Right there, I have my station clock, which is right there is the GPS receiver. And this thing tells me to, within a fraction of a millisecond, what the time is. And by golly, that better be on time. I expect that of it. I want it to be that time. Now, the computer, of course, is, in order to do whisper, you need to have some synchronization between your computer's clock and the world of timekeeping. The piece of software I use is hidden. Let's see. I'm not sure I can find it. It's a special piece of software that's recommended by Joe Taylor that synchronizes your computer's clock. It has to be synced within a second. And actually, by looking at my computer clock, which has a second hand on it, I've got a little analog clock up there. It has a second hand on it. And compare that with the GPS clock. They are right on each other, right on top of each other. Even though the computer gets its time over the internet, and I get my time here from GPS. They're very, very close. Let's see, my mother was an external aircraft fuel tank inspector in World War II. She was only about 19 at the time. Ranger Smith said, Adon DeGidio says, my mother was a Rosie, the riveter building P-47 Thunderbolt fighters. Well, you know what happened in World War II? There were quite a few hams, 100,000 or so. And most of them were quite young. Back then it was a hobby that really appealed to the young. Think gaming, what gaming is today. It's for the young. When World War II broke out, a majority of the hams went into the service because they already knew Morse code. And back then, that's how everything was sent, was Morse code. So they had a ready reserve of amateur operators in times of national emergency. It used to be one of the official purposes of ham radio, but I think that got combined into something else. Let's see. Which city? One Casler syndrome event, and all SATCOMs except the highest orbits will degrade rapidly. HF will have its own issues. There is this idea of EMP. The only example we have of actual nuclear EMP is the starburst tests in the 50s. And everything that you look at about it, if you read the footnotes, it goes back to the starburst test. Same thing. We have a limited amount of data. Technology has changed enormously since then. It used to be that if lightning hit a power line, it would pop the breakers, and then some person would have to go out and reset them. Well, they're all self-resetting now. It used to be that you could blow out the front ends of your receiver. There's actually protection in there for that. And now we have lightning arresters on all our antennas. You do, don't you? And things are grounding, all that sort of thing. An EMP event, of course, if we had a EMP event up in the ionosphere, we would have bigger problems. We'd be in the middle of a nuclear war. Okay, so that'd be very different. I don't see another nuclear event like that taking place. There are very few people who have the capability to do that. And you've got to remember, if they do that to us, they are doing it to themselves at the same time. And they wouldn't want to do that. Now, on a more granular level, we've got a lot of communication satellites that are at very low levels that could be taken down. Both the Chinese and the Americans have demonstrated satellite kill capability. The Chinese not so responsibly. They picked a orbit about 200 miles up, and all the debris from that crash is still there. Whereas the one we picked deliberately a little lower so that the debris would decay and come down to Earth. Okay, let's see. By the way, if you have an ionospheric upset event, regardless of the source, it's only going to last for days. 5-10 days. And then things will go back to normal. Okay. So it's not like you can't destroy the ionosphere. You can disrupt it and then it will recover. Okay. Trying to learn optimum times a day, QSO and HF bands. Do you have a video on the subject? Barry, the general rule is this. During the day, you use the higher bands. Try 20, 15 even 6, 10, whatever. Try these different bands. But 20 is going to be a good bet. During the evening, try 40. At night, try 80. The lower bands at night, the higher bands. Now, when we get to the top of the sunspot cycle, if it's like the one 2 cycles ago, 3 cycles ago, I was doing 15-meter transoceanic, transcontinental communications between me and Asiatic Russians at 11 o'clock at night. Propagation was hot. Okay. Would tube-type radios survive a large EMP from a nuke? Maybe. Tubes can stand higher transients, but that doesn't mean they can withstand them all. It's not a general thing. Now, in the radios now that we have, you've got a lightning arrestor on the thing, which is actually a tube. And then it's passive arrestor, and then the radio itself has them. All of my antennas come into the house via lightning arrestors. Because we are prone to lightning in this area during the summer, somewhat. And if there is an EMP event, the lightning arrestors are going to get most of it. Some people will completely disconnect their radios when they're not using them. If you are in a lightning-prone area like Tampa, Florida, okay, during the summer when you have lightning, disconnect your radio and leave it disconnected all the time except when you use it. And in those periods of time, connect it, use it, and then disconnect it. And that includes ground, everything. Completely isolate that radio. Putting it in an aluminum box is overkill, but if it makes you feel better, you can. It doesn't hurt anything to do that, except maybe your back. Now, we're slightly lightning prone, so I leave my stuff connected all the time. If you're in a slightly lightning prone area, you might want to, if there is a lightning storm in the area, disconnect your equipment. But like that. Human malware. Oh, golly. Let's see. Yeah, Fleet Wings, Bristol, Pennsylvania. They built part of the tail section that we shipped to another plant for final assembly. Oh, it was an amazing. Ford took a couple years to build a plant that used their technology. It was the B-24 Liberator. And they put out a plane an hour, something like that. I mean, it was unbelievable. It wasn't all that great an airplane. They were very difficult to fly. If you flew a B-17 all day, you could get back to base and walk off the thing go down to the pub, whatever. If you flew B-24 all day, you were exhausted by the time you got back. It just was so much work. And the pedals, like my airplane, my Rand's S6CS, if you take your hand off the joystick, if you take your hand off the stick, the aircraft levels out and flies straight. Now, if it's trimmed to go down or trimmed to go up, it'll do that. But, I actually keep a very loose hand on it. I know a lot of pilots who are always chasing the airplane back and forth as it tilts and so on. I just let it tilt and so on because it always comes back to zero. And if it doesn't, just one little swipe of the stick and it will. I used to work there when it was a refrigerator factory, before the war. Okay, guess you didn't know where they were sent. Security could be. Would tube-type radios survive a large EMF from a nuke? Maybe, but go ahead and put that lightning arrestor on there, okay? And it's only the front end that's the problem. Now, you have the problem with the induced EMF on the power lines. Most of today's radios are 12 volt, so there'll be a 12 volt power supply. And that provides a layer of separation between your radio and the mains, whereas most tube-type radios used high voltages. Very often the power supply was in the radio and you plug that into the wall. So if you got a large transient in there, it hit that transformer and could do quite a bit of damage to if it blew out the transformer, you're dead. You're dead in the water. I have a question. Whoops. Reading the questions and giving the answers is a study guide, a worthy cause. They're better to break it down into questions per ARRL sections. My recommendation is per the ARRL sections. And then study the book. Watch the video for the section. Study the book, study the questions till you understand them, repeat as needed, and keep going on that way. And I think that's the best way to do it, really. If you use my videos for that, I try to explain not just the answer to the question, which is useless except to answer the question. I have met a lot of people who have passed their amateur exams and do not know a thing about amateur radio. I try to teach it in such a way that you will know about amateur radio when you are done. Okay, Mike Oswald is with us. Yeah, Ranger Smith, you're right about the mechanical watches. The Swiss blew it. KE0OG, a Japanese company, brought its first quartz watch to a Swiss watchmaker's show and were roundly ignored, in fact, even poo-pooed. Where are the Swiss watchmakers today? Now, if you look at the old conductor's watches, used in railroading prior to the telegraph, they had to be extremely accurate because you ran the trains according to time schedules. And a late train could be the cause of a fatal crash, so they were done that way. Then when the telegraph came in, they came up with this idea of time zones, which formally came later, but all a single central operator would need to do would at high noon to send a DIT, and then everybody could adjust their watch to that because they still ran them on time. Let's see. Newbie question, what is my grid? I'm asked this and don't know how to respond. These are the Maidenhead grid system. Let's look it up over here on the screen. We'll go to Wikipedia and go to Maidenhead locator system. Okay, the Maidenhead locator system is a ham radio thing. Okay, it succinctly describes your geographic coordinators, and it's called the Maidenhead locator system, and can define anything in the world. There is a way to take your latitude and longitude, and it's right here, and convert that into your grid square, which are actually rectangles. Now, if you take the first 4 of these, that will get you within about 50 miles. If you take 6 of these, that'll get you within a not very big area. If you go to 8 out here, you're getting yourself way out into places that you don't need to be. My grid square is DM68CG. Okay, and the thing about this is that FT8 uses these, so you can ask Google questions. What is my grid square? Ham radio grid square locator. Enter any address or enter any call sign. Let's enter KE0OG and submit. And this actually shows the wrong grid square. It's DM68CG. I actually live up over here. So this thing's got it in a bad place. That's wrong. DM68CG. Okay. DM68. Now if you do DM68, let's see, it's giving the same thing. Yeah, that's not right. There's something wrong with that website. You can try a different. Let's see, grid squares ARRL just indicates what they are. Grid mapper by QRZ. This might be a little bit better off. Okay, let's take DM68CG. Okay, I am actually, you see where that dot is right there? That dot way down at the bottom, that's me. Okay, I am barely inside DM68CG. Okay, so you could actually make the grid square smaller. Now, if I just put in DM68, no, it's not going to go there. You got to do the 6th letter. Okay, it's a much larger area, but FT8. Let's go back to the live stream and normal view. The grid square, your 4-digit grid square is what you use for FT8. And it gives you your location. Oh, western Colorado, southwestern Colorado. Okay. And that's used as the locator. The CG gets it much closer. Although, if you go across my back fence, you're in a different grid square. We're actually that close. Okay, I hope that answers your question about grid squares. I suppose I should do a video about those. Okay, so what grid you're in, you would refer to where your home address is, and you just go ask that question, what is my grid square of Google, and use the QRZ page, and you'll get the right one, which we saw. Let's see. Good evenings from Cecil and Ruben. And let's see, IZ, greetings from Canada. Does it make sense to have a dipole antenna running along the roof edge or building walls to make it stealth? If that is all you can do, yes. Yes, I know a guy in Montrose who has his entire house circled by a thin wire that's held up by spacers every 10 feet or so, held away from the gutter. And he's able to get into some local 80-meter nets using that. So it does work. Is it optimum? No, not at all. You will wish it could be higher. But will it work? Yes. Casler event's not EMP. Two satellites collide. The debris cloud hits more, creates more debris, and the shrapnel brings down all of them. That's not going to happen. The debris is a problem. I'm saying the debris is a problem, okay? And one of the problems is that the debris is too small to track from Earth. You have to have something about the size of your fist to track it from Earth. Because satellites are colliding all the time. The Chinese just got very unhappy because one of Elon Musk's satellites came very clear of their space station, very close to their space station. Let's see, how good or bad an idea is it to use my Wolf River coil as a mast for the KM4ACK end-fed half-wave antenna? Okay, the first rule in antennas is everything affects everything. Now, a dipole, I'm going to draw a picture here of a dipole. Okay, here's the cable. Now, most of the radiation is off the sides, of course, and it's horizontal. As you get toward the end of the dipole, you still have some radiation off the ends of the dipole. And this radiation happens to be vertical. Okay? So, if you are holding this up with a vertical antenna, you will get coupling between the antennas. Okay? So, be forewarned. Be forewarned on that. Let's see. Don't have any other kind of mast. I have a video out there where if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, and you get go in the chain link fence section and get lengths of chain link fence top rail. It's the top rail, and the ends of it are tapered. So you've got one coming like this. And then the next pipe fits over it like this. Okay? Now if you get two of these and put them vertically and guy them at the top, okay, the connections there. Usually I put a little duct tape here so they don't come apart while I'm putting it up. But you can use that for a quick and easy 20-foot mast. Quick and easy. It won't work for 30 feet. The thing will bend. But 20 feet it does work pretty well. I got this original from Lou French, and I thought it was a just fantastic idea, and so I've really pushed it. I have very tall, long needle pine trees. How tall do my dipoles need to be to go through the needles? Thanks. Dean, I would note that if you're dealing with trees sway. You've got to have something for if they sway back and forth like this. I would recommend a spring rather than a mass or weight, but some sort of spring. You can get pretty industrial bungee cords and pull that thing down so you've about double the length of the bungee cord or whatever. put something over them to protect them from UV, because UV will destroy the rubber in them. And if you live in an area that has bad air pollution, the air pollution will also eventually affect the rubber. But that allows the trees to move a little bit. The ideal height for a dipole, in my humble opinion, and you all know how humble my opinions are, is a half wave. Now that means a different height for different antennas, and you can't always do that. But if you want the optimum pattern, here I'll show you here. If you want your pattern to look like this, this is for 1/2 lambda. Now, what happens if you put it higher? Let's put it at 1 lambda, 1 wavelength. Here's the pattern you get. It's slightly lower, but you've got a huge null in there. And you've bifurcated the pattern, and this is a null. Whereas, and now this is lower than the center of the other, if you do it lower, okay? But you don't have the null. Don't have the null that you need to work with. There are very competitive contest stations where a guy will have a real tall mast and might have multiple beams on it. So he can select which beam works best. And it's not always the top one. Okay. So now if you put up like the reference antenna, it's a multiband antenna. Let's just get it as high as you can and be practical. I would recommend, when you're dealing with pine trees, talk to a tree surgeon about how you attach things to the trees so that you don't damage the trees. And I saw a clump of aspens, ornamental aspens, in somebody's yard where they'd put a large iron ball between the 3 of them. Well, the 3 of them grew around the iron ball, and they've all got it in its grasp. And unfortunately, all the trees are weakened where it went around the iron ball. So be nice to your trees. Pines are particularly subject to beetles, and beetles just need a single entry point to kill a tree. So talk, like I said, to a tree surgeon about how to do that properly. And also, I would recommend that rather than trying to climb the tree or climb a tall ladder or pay some kid to climb the tree, that you go get a bucket lift system. You can rent these. And use that thing to push you up, or to just take you up to the height that you want to be at. Another thing about putting up antennas, always have a safety observer. I got stuck on the roof once because I went up there foolishly and had trouble getting down, and I didn't have my phone with me, and I was in a world of hurt. I was up there 40 minutes or so before I got things straightened out and ready to come down. The reason for a safety observer, the safety observer has one duty only, and that is to call 911 in the event of an emergency. The safety observer doesn't hold the ladder, the safety observer doesn't pull on a rope, the safety observer doesn't do anything other than call 911 in the event of an emergency. You don't want to have your safety observer encumbered by pulling on a rope that if he lets go, it's going to hurt you more. So have that safety observer there. I use my wife for that. Okay. Let's see. We've got geothermal geysers in Santa Rosa. An MFJ carbon fiber mass that goes up 32 feet. Is that the one that kind of bends over? Yeah, great mass for an end-fed half wave, a lot of them. Let's see, I kind of lost my place here. Able to afford at the moment, Paul. Okay, Paul, the cost of those chain link fence top rail, they're dirt cheap. Go down and look at those. It'll cost you more for the rope to guy it than it will for the things. If you can use something that's a consumer object like chain link fence parts, which you can freely get at Home Depot, they're dirt cheap. It's a commodity item, and they're priced at a commodity price, where sometimes ham equipment is what's called value priced. It's priced based on what it's worth to you rather than what it costs to build it. Commodity pricing is kept low just by the law of supply and demand. Okay, let's see. I already have 7,300, 705. That's a little duplication there. WRC ATU and a battery, but I'm like, a mast is pricey. Okay, $25 for a mast? How's that? It shouldn't be much more than that. Okay. Paul, if you just go look for this mast, you can get something pretty good. Perhaps it's providing the grid square of my P.O. box. Maybe. That would be in Ridgeway. Okay. Is your grid square off because the call sign is to a P.O. box? It could be. But the QRZ one got it correct. And my FCC license goes to the P.O. box, but QRZ had me in the correct location. I think I must have gone on QRZ and said P.O. box's address, physical location. I think I put in my grid square. Okay, the 1910 is 120. Okay. Maidenhead website pulls your address from the FCC. So if you have a P.O. box, yeah, okay, it's the P.O. box. But it was DM68CG, which surprises me. Okay, where's Dave pulling questions from at the moment? I just pulled Paul Jameson's question, which says, where is Dave pulling questions from at the moment? What if the edge of your roof is 30 foot high for that dipole? That's fine. It's a good connection point. I see him thinking about using the end-fed half-wave mainly for POTA. So now my antenna is end-fed half-wave. I was really surprised what a good antenna it is. I set it up. They strongly hinted in the instructions to set it up as an inverted V, and I did that, and it worked wonderfully. And what I used for it was a 20-foot mast made of chain link fence top rail. And fantastic. Okay, let's see. Have you done any videos on antenna modeling software? Yes, I have. I've been having some fun with Auto Easy and Easy NEC. Easy NEC is now free. However, there's no support for it. But on the other hand, I've never needed any support for it. So, Easy NEC is now free. In fact, it's mentioned in my January column in QST. The January issue is the one that's out right now. Okay, Optical Man Jeff, KE0OG, puts $15 into the chat revenue. Thank you. He says, thanks, Dave, for everything, and Happy New Year. Okay, Dave, the antenna is on the hillside, but the trees are in the way of the line of sight from the antenna. P.S. We know about wildfires. Yeah, my children are fine, and their home is fine, but they were among the evacuated. Jennifer works for Ball Aerospace in Broomfield, and I think something like 50 of their employees lost their homes. And so Ball is kicking in some money and stuff like that to try and, get them back on their feet. A major disruption out there. I mean, there are parts. I know people. Some of the people who lost their homes, I know these people. Used to go to church with them, used to do things with them. It just never in my wildest dreams crossed my mind that they could be subject to an urban wildfire. But that's what it was, an urban wildfire. There were no mountains involved of any kind. And they're trying to figure out exactly what started the fire. Okay, so Optical Man Jeff, thank you very much. Paul Jameson's, I was referring to the 300 mast in regard to not being able to afford that at the moment. Okay, it's on the hillside, but the trees are in the way. Don't worry about the trees. The trees are not going to impact your signal very much. Better to get above the ground as high as you can. Now, if you have, and we'll go to the overhead here, if you have, use another color here. If you are on a slope and you put your, why is that not focusing? Sometimes you have to persuade it to focus. There we go. If you're on a slope and you've got a dipole strung here, okay, the direction of the beam will be mostly that way with some that way, okay, but it does act like you're in a big bowl reflector. Okay, supported every 10 feet. Yes, you should. I have had them come down. I had at one of these masts, of course, the weak point is where the two poles come together, and it was bent like a pretzel at that point, about that like that, and it was just kind of hanging up there from the antenna, and either the deer hit it in the night or the wind got it. Now, it wasn't holding up very much. I use this mast, this type of masting, for holding up dipoles, off-center fed dipoles, testing dipoles, etc. I have a MFJ hex beam out in the back, which is a much bigger antenna and much heavier. And I use a different pole. The pole I use is aluminum, and I'm not sure what type. Aluminum pipe. It's a full stick of pipes at 20 feet. It is got no cuts or anything in it, and it's Schedule 40 dimensions. So it's much thicker than the ordinary stuff that you would see in the top rail, which I do believe is steel. But this aluminum pole is one bad boy and holds that antenna up, and it has held it up for 2 or 3 years now. And it just keeps on plugging. It's not been bad. We've had some severe windstorms through here, and it's been fine for that. Okay, very good night. Oh, it is getting that time, isn't it? The ham radio is moving on to digital techniques. Absolutely, yes. Digital is sneaking its way into ham radio everywhere we can. The ICOM 7300 is a fully software-defined radio, all the way from the input is basically buffered, filtered mechanically, well, not mechanically, but a simple filter for the band, like a roofing filter, and then it's converted to it's sampled very, very frequently at a couple times the Nyquist rate, and then it is decimated down in frequency, and that's how they create a digital IF, and then it gets into all of the processing that it goes through before it spits out a signal, that feeds an analog amplifier and speaker or headphones. Now, FT8 is digital, right? Well, not quite, because the interface between the computer and the sound card is digital, but the sound card makes sounds, and the sounds are analog. So there is a little piece of analog in there that's still there. Now, RIDI is pure digital. PSK31 goes through the analog because it uses sound card. Okay, and I'm talking about FSK RIDI. Let's see. Okay, I have one more thing I was going to show you. This review in this month's QST, the Baofeng GT5R. I had a video on that thing some months ago. It's a very interesting little radio. It's the UV5R, which is the $20 radio everybody's got one of. But I've got a Spectrum Analyzer over here now, thanks to Brad Rich. He sold me his at a great discount. And I was able to test it to show the difference between the UV5R, which is a piece of crap, and the GT5R, which has an actual proper filtering on its RF output, and costs about the same or a little more. The price keeps going up and down on them. Let's see what a GT5... Well, no, we're out of time. Okay, could you... updated review on the Zygo G SOC. I don't have one of those. Out here in the armpit of Arizona, you must be in quartzite. A lot of dirt and low moisture. How can dry dirt affect an antenna along with coax? And the sun can really work on it too. Paul, I could talk about that for a while. When you get into soil that dry, you have to think in terms of the height of the effective ground. And when you put your antenna up and you're considering height above ground, you need to consider height above effective ground. Effective ground could be 10 feet, maybe more, below the surface of the physical ground. And when you ground your equipment, look at the video I did of N6, somebody on grounding techniques for deserts. There's something called ground enhancing material you can use that will make your grounds more effective too. DJ Jackson adds $5 to the channel funds and said appreciate your channel and live streaming very much. And he says you're the... he's got a picture of a bomb there. Okay, thank you all very much for what you've done. We've raised $125 this evening in channel funds, which go to things like paying for my assistant, shipping goodies like these and so on, and for so many other things. It's going to pay for the trip down to Quartz Fest and so on. So we are out of time. We're past time. I just want to say I love you guys. I think this is a wonderful way to get together. There are 147 people viewing right now, although 10 times that number have stopped by for a few minutes. Again, remember the problem with these things. If you see any of those, don't call that number. That is a spam comment, and it's been hacked in there. So I'm sure YouTube is now aware of them and is taking care of them. So until we next meet, 73.